I think the first thing we should talk about is the context of the song. So there are four brothers. Their mother is not there. She's left. And the father is dead. The four of them, they live quite shabbily. You can very clearly see that they're missing that feminine touch, in their lives. In their mindset, in their overall attitude towards life, they are shown as good guys who are quite vulnerable and quite lost in life. So this is the female voice that they're missing in their lives, which is their mother primarily. And she's singing that, I'll be there in your blazing memory, and in the swirling pitch darkness, I'll burn to give you light. And I'll soothe and heal the world's pain as the cool breeze in the morning, and I'll help you to the shore. The gap between the yearning for nurturing that we know from the story and the reality of its absence. They have a house which doesn't have a door. The visuals are very, very, quite harsh. But the song is quite the opposite. It's very soothing. It's like a lullaby. It's in a very soothing voice. The production is very minimal. And it's quite lilting and, just carries through. So that contrast is visible throughout the song in the choice of harmonic structure. I'll come to that. Versus the melody. And similarly, there is also a contrast in the rhythm section. There is a very clear swing to it. But the melody is very straight. Sushan's voice comes only in the end just for 2 lines. But it sings lyrics which are on the same lines as what the female was singing. The narrative of the film is the story of these guys finally accepting and fulfilling this inherited task. The transition in the vocals at the end is the entire film's essence in one musical move. So the song begins as the absent mother's memory and ends with the son's acceptance of that nurturing role. See, it's also the most replayed part. It just stands out, right? And this is the place where the male voice comes in. And what he's saying is, son, I'm here at a distance. The concept is them accepting that there is no mother who's going to come back. They have to play that role. Firstly, it's an Mixolydian, so you have a flat 7th. And there's a lot of confusion about the scale of this song because it starts on a certain chord that's not the scale. It goes to some chords, those are, also there is no home chord in those. So I'll talk about what it does. There is a modal mixture in the second half, in the bridge. It goes to E Aeolian. E Aeolian is basically your natural minor. The intro and the verse are unique. They don't repeat anywhere in the song, which is this whole orange part. Now let's listen to how the song starts with the picking. So it starts on a G major, but it's not in G. It's one of those songs that doesn't start on the root chord. It actually starts on a chord which is not even in the diatonic scale. The song is in E, like I told you, E Mixolydian. G major, D major, E minor, B minor, but the thing is the scale is not G major. Right? That's your scale. When it finally lands on E major, that's your scale. So this, from the very beginning, the interest value kind of sets in where it's starting and where she's singing. Now, if you're doing, for example, the way she sings, I could have done that on E7th also, right? The same melody works on, but that's not how it starts. It starts on G major. And there is a descending bass line, which is your G major, and then D in the root of F sharp. So it's not like this, it's like that. So that your bass moves. The second cycle doesn't finish. You would expect the second cycle to, go all the way like the first cycle. But halfway through, she starts singing because the chord goes back to G. Again, this is not a PhD on the song. This is, as music makers, what can we learn from this? Is not to get bound by your chord progression. Often what we think is, if we have 4 bars or 8 bars of something, we have to repeat that or not repeat that. But you can repeat that halfway through. And then come back to 0 again, or 1, you're basically your starting point again. So it just makes for more interesting production or structure, and that's what this song does. So in this case, now this is one cycle, goes back to G, and after B minor, you're expecting it to go back to G, A, E, right? And A is obviously in the scale of E. A to E would be your plagal cadence, so your 4 to 1, right? But in this case, after B minor 7th, it goes to G, but then it doesn't do that A and E again. The song starts. So this becomes the downbeat for after 4 chords, halfway through, you have same chords repeat. Okay, let's talk about production a little bit, because this is a mixing / production thing now. Listen to the beginning. It's very, very center and, almost sounds like it's mono. And the concept here is you have 3 dimensions to kind of work in. Your left and right, which is the pan, front and back, which is your dry, front and center, and your reverb. Or even delays give you that sense of space. Even EQ gives that sense of space. Shave off some of the top end, the sound feels like it's further back. And then you have the third dimension, which is your high and low. Your high frequencies and then your low frequencies. So if you give away everything in the beginning of the song, you often have nowhere to go. And what this song does, because it's very minimal, it kind of, doesn't give you much in the beginning. It's just front and center, it's just mono, the guitar as well as the singing. But the first time you actually hear a sense of width and depth together is this part. This is a mixing tip, or this is a production tip. That whistle didn't have to be so wet with reverb, but what that does is, just before she repeats what she just sang with different lyrics, but the same melody almost, you get a sense of interest because the depth is introduced. And I've done deconstructions. I have reels also where I talk about my own projects where I have done this. I think it's really interesting to keep in mind. I mean, what's the playground you have available, right? And how do you reveal it slowly rather than all in the beginning? That's the learning in this. Now she's repeating that part. This whole section, like I mentioned, doesn't repeat again. So after this section, which is unique and which doesn't repeat, we reach a section which is the cross, which actually repeats in the end as well. So this is here for a reason. It also connects between this section and the humming. Humming, I think, is really the key part of the song, because even when Sushin sings in the end, it's on the humming section. Now the major thing not in harmony, but not in the melody, almost until the bridge. So it's not just the first section I'm talking about, the cross, and then there is the interlude that comes on the viola. That suggests a major third, and then the bridge actually uses the major third halfway through the song. So for a song that's on E mixolydian, which uses the major third, is not revealing the major third in the melody. In the scale of E, actually I wrote it wrong. This would not be half cadence. You're stopping on the 4. And that continues. Now when the humming starts here, if you count, the first beat is empty. So in terms of counting the meter, right? So these are 5 beats. It should be 2 bars. But the first beat is... Again, it makes for just interesting structure. I mean, he could have started the humming on the downbeat and taken it for 6 beats. But again, this is a throwing off thing where you're expecting something there, but it's not there. Now, in the cross in the humming, the cross is something that came till now, the blue section. In this whole of humming, there is no clear third. And this is again my take. I feel neither third works. If you have noticed by now, the width has come in. And I would say it has crept in. Because you don't really realize when the song becomes wider. At some point it does. And I've played the whole bit till now. We don't know when it became wide. And these are things which play on the minds of the listeners. You know, they don't have to understand. They don't have to consciously feel कि यहाँ पे ये हुआ, वहाँ पे वो हुआ, because most of our listeners are non-musicians. So it's as long as you know what you're doing and you know you're aware that you're trying this, it's all good. And then you have the interlude, which is also a unique section. Now I often speak about melodic rhythm. Melodic rhythm would be using the same rhythm of your melody but different notes. Right? And when we try to tie a song together or make it sound cohesive, what we normally try to do is, and you can again listen for this or look for this in the songs you like, you'll find that the melodic rhythm is repeated in quite a few places. Elsewhere on the scale, different intervals, but your melodic rhythm is the same. And that's something that comes naturally to us because we've heard so much music that does it, that when we try to compose, we end up doing the same thing. Now in this case, what she did here, this interlude is totally different. Right? It follows that loosely. It just has more swing and more delayed notes, but it has a tying in factor to that section. Now you'll find that the major third has come now. For the first time in the song, very clearly. This will not work. Certainly sounds very off, right? And it's not that. It is. So now the major third has been established. Interlude sets up the major third. Bridge follows with it. But the bridge harmony uses the flat sixth without the melody using it. Much like in the beginning I spoke about how could you use an E7th, right? But you're using a, right? Similarly here, I'll show you that part where the harmony goes on a C major 7th for no reason. I mean, there is a reason, I'll explain. It sets you up for the section that comes later. This part, right? Now, this is the C major 7th here. It could have been just, why not E major? Now there is also a descending bass line here. B7 sus4 would be your B sus4 with a 7th. Right? So it does. Now this, it uses an F sharp, or you can say F sharp 11th, with this kind of a color. I'm doing an add 11th here, but this is essentially from the E Mixolydian. All the three notes are there in the parent scale, but it sounds very different because of the F sharp. Now, if you notice, I spoke about how the C major 9th, like in this case, this one, the main factor in that is the C note, and we'll see now the C note is your flat 6th, which is not really part of E major, it's a part of E minor, right? Now that creeps in here. Now here, now if you see, your melody has started using the flat 6th. It doesn't sound very off, it doesn't sound abrupt, because the harmony had already thrown that in. and then use a secondary dominant, in this case F sharp, to go back to B. In this case, it's a B7 flat ninth, which is a very, very subtle thing, right? Even if you don't use the flat 9, it will work. It's not, it's a stylistic thing. So this is the section that has come earlier, and the only difference is, so the minor third, because all this while sounds fine because you've been exposed to the minor third in this whole section, right, towards the end. And there's a flat sixth as well. The second half of the bridge is E Aeolian, your natural minor. That's the modal mixture here. Back to that empty beat. This is pretty much the same as this humming. And even when Sushin sings, that part is beautiful for its own reasons, right? The lyrics, the unexpected male voice, it's built on the humming. I haven't written it's the same chords here, pretty much. This I told you, I think instead of D major, there's a B minor. These chords have come earlier, right? I mean, there is a E7 sus2, which would be, right? But E7 sus2 can also be interpreted in this case like a B minor, because how much difference is there from a B minor? It's only the 11th or the 4th which is different. So that's your B minor. And if you play the 4th, next octave, very close to E7 sus2. So this play between the major third and the minor third, and the contrast with the harmony, and the use of the, again, I won't say clashing, but a non-participating harmony in the bridge, which is your using a flat sixth, which sets you up for the melody to follow that later. They first bring back the major sixth, bring back the major third. You're back to, where you started. And I think the biggest thing to take away from this is, if you have a brief like that where very clearly the director has thought through what they're doing, how do you bring that into music? And I think that using the male vocals at the end, it's like a conceptual thing that ties in with the movie, but also in terms of production. I mean, don't you think that it was very easy to add drums and bass guitar to this? Wouldn't have been difficult at all. There is so much space. There is, I think, some pads which give it some width. It's very minimal. Even at the end, this is definitely more produced than verses. There's a counter melody. Another thing I wanted to talk about is when you have a bridge. This is again, a learning or a conceptual thing. When you go to a bridge, you pretty much have a free license, I feel, as a composer or as a producer, to do something which has not been done till then. Because that's the whole point of a bridge. It's a deviation from what you've done till then. It's not a verse, it's not the chorus, it's not the interlude, it's something new. And in this case, in this song, the bridge uses a melodic rhythm which hasn't come till now, and which doesn't come after that, which is this rhythm doesn't come anywhere. Yeah, this was my take on it. I think the more important thing, like I said, was not the PhD on the song, but what can we learn from this in our own music, and feel freer to kind of do things rather than get tied down by the scale. The harmony and the melody don't really talk to each other all the time. It doesn't sound off. And also the minimalism. I feel what really works for me in this song, other than, it's a great song, everything works, but the minimalism. If I overproduce this song, it suddenly stops working. Over to you guys. What do you think?